My brother. I'm the little sister. And I'm just going to read this because there's no other way I'm going to get through it. But I just thank you so much for coming. I have no words to convey how very comforted my dad, Ori, and Sharia and I are by all the love and the prayers being sent our way. This grief cuts deep, and we are forever grateful for your love and our care. I know too that Chad's many friends and acquaintances here are feeling this deep loss. I'm still in shock. I think maybe I'm not the only one. And it's going to take some time to process and some focused effort to process this. I am choosing to walk on this difficult grief journey, and I purpose not to let this loss swallow me up. But it's going to take some effort. It's a unique grief. And I can't let this opportunity pass by to encourage you to consider also putting effort into your grief journey, knowing full well that it's different for every single person. But I cannot risk this loss being in vain. If you are, or you know somebody who might be struggling for hope, please risk telling someone. Please try to reach out. Let us do better to hold on to the ones that we love. Let us all try a bit harder to see, to hear, to reach out to those who are hurting. I want to see better. I want to ask more. I want to listen better. And I want to really, really hear. I want to be brave enough to ask the uncomfortable questions. And so, Big Chad. In our family, he is known as Big Chad, as he was the first of many Chad cousins. I mean, it's only been the last few years that he's been really Big Chad. But he's been known as Big Chad to us for decades because he came first. Chad was born Charles Paul Upshall on June 19th, 1959. He was born to Charles Paul and Pearl Hope in Minnedosa, Manitoba. The family then moved on to South Carolina for a couple years for further education before settling into Niagara Falls, much to the joy of my mom's family. Her brothers and sister adored this first grandchild immensely. Chad was busy and delightful, totally blonde, towhead kid. He was full of joy and mischief that he carried very bravely into his adult life. Yeah, I had a really good story here, but I found out that it's a total lie, so I had to... Tell the good version? Okay, it was really good, but it was clarified later. So when Chad was 5, between 3 and 5 we'll say, he was totally done with his babysitter. And he thought Grandma's place would be better. They're living in Niagara Falls at this time. So he decided to walk to their motel that was about a half mile away. He crossed a couple busy tourist streets, downtown Niagara Falls. Everybody was pretty scared once they realized he was missing, because that took some time. Grandma was so upset when he arrived at the motel that she made him turn around and walk all the way back. So the other version is it was really his uncle who was babysitting, who was about 8 years older than him, I think. And something happened and they broke the precious antique lamp, and the babysitter ran away. And Chad at the house by himself when he was 5. And I think Grandma was just as mad because the kid was left and made the uncle walk back by himself. So.
Your version's better.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So
More believable.
more. yes. No one Chad. Yeah. That's why it was so good. And then there's another time in Calgary. I think we're about Chad was about 6 when we moved to Calgary, and we were at Dee and Don's place. Chad was having a bath, and all eyes were off of him for a little while because he was, 6 or so. And it wasn't too long afterwards that a neighbor brought a naked boy back to the house because he had escaped and was gone. Chad was busy, determined, and very adventurous, and maybe a little bit stubborn. I remember also when we lived in Calgary, there's a lot of construction going on in the 60s in Calgary, and Chad taught me that, we could go to the new basements that were just freshly tarred, and it was so much fun to pop all the tar bubbles and get covered in tar and then run home so Dad could try to clean us up before Mom got home from work. So, yeah, that was fun. Then 1966, the great move west. We spent a short time in Calgary before we moved to Webster. And that's where he grew up learning the fine trade of beekeeping and hobby farming. Webster is a great little community about 6 miles north of Sexsmith. And that Webster farm was a great place to grow up, even though these 2 little kids felt rather isolated at first. I remember the big fort Chad and I built behind the barn. Spent a lot of time there. I remember Chad teaching me how to play hockey. And you had to raise the puck just right so he could practice being a goalie. It wasn't really about playing hockey, it was all about Chad practicing being a goalie. I don't remember a lot of black marks on the house, and we didn't break any windows. So, Chad might have been a kind of good goalie back then, although I'm sure he outgrew my slot shots pretty soon. There was another time we were playing hockey or whatever on the dugout. We had 2 little dugouts out by the barn, and we had to move the goalposts from one side to the other for some reason. I don't know why. I had to move the goalposts, which were logs or tree stumps, and we're carrying them across, and I fell through the ice. But my brother, he got me back to the house really lickety-split, and I got warmed up really good, and it was probably because he didn't want to get in trouble, but I think he cared about me, so we'll go with that. Chad and I, we had our own version of the Amazing Race. We would trek off into the bush on the north end of our property and spin around about 3 times and then run and see who could remember how to get back to the house fastest. Of course, he always made it before me, which is a little surprising because I was way more terrified of the bears. But I know I ran fast, but he was 3 years older than me. That was always a big surprise to people who met us both, that I was younger. I wasn't going to say it, but thanks, Ellen. And I think he was training me to be good with directions even back then, because he never could understand how somebody couldn't figure out where they were, or if they were directionally challenged. It's like, you just know where you are. I remember Christmas Monopoly tournaments between us and the Fontaines, wherever Roger is. We would drive the snow machine back and forth between our homes. I was responsible to carry the box and wasn't allowed to get any of the let any of the contents jiggle or slide until we got there. The board had to be set up exactly right so there was no cheating. I remember the countless times Chad and I were late for the school bus and Merle would have to drive the half-mile up to the house to get us. One of those times when we were rushing for the bus, the throttle got stuck on the snow machine, and he was driving, of course, and I was securing the trombone and my clarinet and our books and our lunches, and we had no backpacks. I was mad, or maybe just really scared, because just because we were late didn't mean that he had to drive crazy through all the trees in our yard. All of a sudden he yelled, "Jump!" just before the machine went through the barbed wire fence. There were a few bruises, but better bruises than going through the barbed wire. Just another day missing the bus. Chad attended Sexsmith School for most of his schooling. He spent a few elementary years at Swanhaven in Grande Prairie. Although he didn't graduate from high school, he did manage to make the grad photo and had the best time at his high school grad. And of course, he secured a lifelong bond with Chuck Lewis. And there are some great stories of Chuck and Chad in New Zealand, and Chuck will tell them all to you. Of course, starting with losing their passports and everything before they even left Grande Prairie, and leaving the camera bag with all the money and the visas and passports on the tour bus in New Zealand, calling home for more money. Chad and Chuck, ever the pair, they lived together for a time in Grande Prairie, and their gang, of course, included Kevin and Roger and Derek and Greg. Those boys shared a vast and deep friendship with Chad. And I don't know a lot of the adventures. I've heard a lot over the last few weeks. And I don't know all the trouble they got into and all the joys and all the trials. I only know a handful of Chad's Grande Prairie friends. But I know from the outpouring of care and concern that's been sent out and from everybody coming today, I know that Chad's has had an indelible mark on so many, many people. That's what makes Chad, Chad. He's friendly, lovable, generous, willing, and kind. Chad always enjoyed sports. Although he liked golf, basketball, and track, he loved to play hockey. I remember watching him in goal and was amazed that he could jump up and duck at the same time when trying to stop a slap shot. I remember showing up to that football game against the Comp just a little bit late, only to see a big tackle that left a Sexsmith saver laying on the ground. I looked over the field and told my friends, well, the guy lying on the field looked short enough to be Chad. Sure enough, I had missed Chad's big play, and he was now heading off to the hospital having had his knee smashed up pretty bad. Chad was always a people person. I thought it was just because academics didn't come easy, but he just loved people, and he loved to bring joy, making people laugh and playing pranks. I don't know many of the pranks, although there's something with hot dogs and chuck. Yeah. But Chad was surely on both sides of those pranks, I'm sure. His friends are very aware how he spread the joy. Chad was so outgoing and fun and generous. Whenever he would be out and about town with my kids, they couldn't go anywhere without Chad having to stop and chat with seemingly every single person. They both always returned home to complain about how long it took because Chad knows everybody in Grande Prairie. We had to stop and talk to them all. In reality, he almost did know everybody back then. I'm so grateful for the time he spent with my kids in the 90s. It was a tough time for us, and I really needed the help, and the kids needed the distraction and his care. Uncle Chad, he adored my kids. The early 80s were some of my favorite times with Chad. We went off to Bible school together in Saskatchewan. It was a bit daunting heading off into the unknown for me, but I had so much more confidence because my older brother was with me. I remember clearly driving those narrow Saskatchewan roads, maybe an hour from Eston, and how we joked that we could just keep on driving to Grandma's house in Niagara Falls. We had all that tuition money in our pocket. No one would know for days, and Grandma would surely take us in. Being at Bible school as near adults together is something I've always cherished. I know there was talk that Chad would never last a year in Bible school, that he would surely get kicked out. Much to his utter shock, it was I who got kicked out. He struggled with that a great deal, and I think working through that situation was another thorn in his struggle with organized religion. A couple years later, found us both attending GPRC together. He was working on completing some high school classes, and we were both taking college classes. I was so proud that he was persisting to get his diploma. Book learning didn't come easy for him. He worked hard, and it paid off. These years together helped us grow into friends, not just siblings. It was after this year at college that I got busy with my own life, getting married and moving out of the country. We didn't see as much of each other then. This change was also happening with his friends in Grande Prairie. They were getting married and having kids and expanding their careers. It was a tough time for Chad, because these were also the joys that he craved. But with that challenge, I saw him endeavor to pivot. He continued to enjoy deep friendships, and he expanded into being the uncle to so very many. The ever-caring, generous soul. Being single made him the available guy that everyone seemed to call when there was a deck that needed to be built or a reno needing extra hands. He loved to help his friends. He would come running whenever a friend called. Remember him as a helper. He was so generous to his many friends, always willing to lend a hand. Before Chad started in sales, he spent some time working in Ontario as a baker. But he couldn't cope with the early mornings. He went building in Calgary for Blaine. But he wasn't a big city kind of guy, and he wasn't all that safe when heights were involved. He also cut meat at Safeway, which I think he kind of enjoyed, but it was a little chilly. And then he started to move into his skill set. He worked at a bouncer at the Crown. I remember being concerned about him as a bouncer. I didn't think of it as a very safe profession. I mean, he wasn't the tallest or the one with the most presence in the room, although he could be fast when he needed to be. But he encouraged me by saying bouncing was much more about talking and cajoling than anything else. I supposed I believed him, but what do I know? I'm sure there are many stories out there about how it really was to be a bouncer. Chad's love of people and his confidence in talking with them helped hone his salesmanship skills. Chad seemed to thrive as a salesman. He worked at CJXX, Computer Town, before getting into the oil and gas industry. He worked at Peace Pipe, Grisgun, Owen Canada, Explosives Limited, and Hunting Energy. He was selling those explosive blasting things, as I understood it. He was good at his job. He worked hard to know his customers and worked diligently to ensure that they had the product they needed when they wanted. They wanted when they needed it. And of course, there is the bust and the boom in the energy sector. Things seemed to line up okay after he left oil and gas. He was a very handy guy, and he and his new wife had a growing business managing bank-owned properties. In 2008, there were quite a few bank-owned properties up in Grande Prairie. But a few years later, it was not only the economy that was going sideways. The breakup of his marriage and the challenge of property management took a toll, and he again relied on his handyman skills and started a painting business. Although he would take on many different types of projects, I really think painting was his jam. This past decade has had many challenges and blessings. It was incredible that Chad was able to live with Mom and Dad those last years in Grande Prairie. This special time allowed for some healing for Chad and precious connection for Mom as she began her fight with dementia. Mom and Dad's relocation to Red Deer was necessary for both of their health challenges. This gave Chad opportunity to be more focused on his handyman and painting business. It was also around this time that his very special and close friend, Jeff McCaution, moved overseas for work. It was an amazing opportunity for Jeff, and Chad was happy for him. Technology is a wonderful thing, and they were able to keep in touch often. and Jeff came back frequently to visit Grande Prairie. But Chad dearly missed Jeff. Jeff's passing in 2020 was a deep blow to Chad, and their friendship was decades in the making, and losing this friend cut deep. Chad's faith was quiet and persistent. He didn't share much with others of his trust in God or his desire to be used of God. Growing up, he had spent many summers at Bible camp, either at Bear Lake near Grande Prairie or Cowichan on Vancouver Island. He did pursue a relationship with Jesus. Much of that was formed at Bible school, but also from being raised in a Christ-centered and God-honoring home. Through his adult life, he spent time reading his Bible. He didn't care much for religious rules and boundaries. He loved Jesus. And he knew Jesus loved him. Jesus washed him with grace and mercy. He had an overwhelming desire to be a man of integrity, to love, inclusion. Chad, a helper and a joy giver. Anyone who knew him experienced this. My kids and I were so honored to look over a few of his journals this past couple of weeks. Oh, how he prayed to have the strength to be available to those he loved, to give encouragement and to supply for our needs. In the waiting, hope seems to be dashed. Yet we have sure confidence in the grip that Jesus has on Chad. I know I will see him again in heaven. This is what I believe. This is what I know to be true. We have all been created to walk a path on this earth. Walking this path gives opportunity to join with our Creator, to draw close to Him, to let Him love us. But we've been created for more than just walking on this path, so much more. Our Creator knows us. He made us. He wants to know us well, to be connected with us. He created us for relationship, for connection. Connection to the Creator, and connection to each of us. And this is why we're here tonight. We're all connected to Chad. Although I am brokenhearted that Chad was so alone on his path this past while, I do find great comfort and peace knowing that our paths will cross again. Being connected to the Creator connects us forever. And I want you all to learn from my broken heart. When Chad gave you a hug, you felt it. When Chad looked at you in the eye, you know you were seen. When Chad showed up to help you, to love on you, you knew he cared for you. Chad was a helper, and he tried to do it well. Chad gave connection. Connection is what it's all about. Give it, receive it. Nurture it, respect it. I want to encourage you all really to remind myself, be connected, get connected, give connection, and receive connection. One is likely harder. It was harder for Chad to receive connection than to give. Put effort into the one that's harder, because it's going to be the harder one that truly satisfies.
Well, that's a hard act to follow.
I hope I can get through this.
Chad and I had an interesting relationship. I would say that we bantered a lot. That's a good way to put it. We did have some great deep conversations, which I always loved so much. I don't know how Chad knew everything about everything. Like, anyone that knows me well knows that I have a huge passion for like whales and dolphins not being in captivity, as an example. Literally 40 years ago, Chad knew about the dolphin slaughter in Taiji, Japan. And we had a huge conversation about it. And I was just shocked that he knew about it. And here it is 40 years later and tons of people still don't know about it. But the bantering part was interesting. I remember going to a wedding one time, and I was newly pregnant with my oldest son. And I think I was about like 3.5 months pregnant, so you just kind of have that little pooch. And I remember Chad, I said something to Chad, I'm like, I can't believe I'm showing in my dress already. And he's like, oh, I think women just, the minute they find out they're pregnant, just let it all hang out. And I'm like, I'm standing there all dressed up and like, Gailey mentioned about how it could be difficult for people as their friends are moving on and getting married and stuff, and this was included Chuck as well, but those two, oh my goodness, like Kevin and I, and he had a water bed of all things too, but the deck went right from this, oh no, this was before we were married, so okay, oops, I was in Kevin's water bed before we were married.
What? You said you never did.
But the deck went right under like the window as well. And like, here's me, butt naked in Kevin's bedroom, and I hear on the window. And it was Chuck and Chad. They just, drove me insane, but I loved them so much at the same time. Anyway, I have way too many stories I could tell, but someone handed me this, and this is really funny, that they wrote down as a cute. Nice shoes meant to Chad in secret code, nice tits. He was a very special person to us, and we will miss our Chad. That he wore so many hats to so many people. Rest in peace, buddy.
I didn't die on this, but after listening to Bailey, I want to say that the first time here I had met Chad and I know it was them, and he was just adamant that I had to meet you. You were the angel, this moment is on. He loved you, and we were cool. And like who's gonna take someone to meet your sister? But you meant, your mom and dad meant the world to him, and I want you to know that. And you did a fantastic job. This is not easy. I'm gonna leave it at that. But I do want you to remember that apple in his eye. Okay?
Have sexual relations with that woman. No babies, but well, I moved here in 1978, and I was under the impression that Upshall had hired me.
I was just kidding.
Anyway, so I moved up here and I worked on their apiary or their bee farm for winter, but I just remember walking in the house and saying, hey, so I guess I'm working with you guys this summer, and your mom looking at me and she goes, yeah, I guess you are. And I only found out about 5 years ago that they didn't hire me. They had no expectation of me showing up. But they just took me in, and it made me feel like I had some value. Anyway, and then Chad, I remember being at the house probably the first 4 days, and this corn binder, I don't know if you guys know what an international truck looks like, but Roger Fontaine had one of these things, and when flying into the yard, he jumps out, slams the door, and the front bumper falls off his truck. And he goes, yeah, so you're Kevin, I guess we're going out. And that became the legacy, I think, for 40 years. I don't know. But we had a fucking ball. I'm sorry. We traveled, we skied in jeans because we didn't have gear. And we, I don't know, I just... Short shorts. And no shirts and and we went out to Nova Scotia to Greg's wedding. I got thrown in jail in the first couple hours I was there. Yeah. Wasn't my fault. Anyway, I had a couple of things written, but you know what? Wouldn't it have been cool if we'd have done this for him when he was alive? You know, I think that we should focus on that more and spend more time with people you love. So that's my 2 cents worth. So thank you.
I don't recall him ever bouncing at the Crown and Anchor, but that's a good story. And I do have a lot of good stories about our friend, and I'm trying to think. As a washed-up bar owner myself, I want to thank Dale and his staff for hosting this event, and Dale. And also, you know, when I was looking for Chad from time to time, I'd come in here, and the women that actually run this bar took very good care of Chad. They looked out for him. They didn't want to know who's, because it wasn't Dale. It was the women that run the bar. I do recall Chad actually got me twice on the fake phone call. I don't know if it's because I'm stupid or well, I'm sure that's what it was, but he got me the page on Mike Hunt. And not only that, and you could just see the light in his eyes. He was so happy that he got me, and then you know, my face goes big red once I realize what he's done to me, and then a year later, he gets me on the phone on his little StarTAC, you know, working at Grisgun, and I go, who are you looking for? Amanda Hug and Kiss. And again, I fell for it. I yelled out, I'm looking for Amanda Hug and Kiss. And one year we were uninvited to have our golf tournament at the Grande Prairie Golf and Country Club, and we had to go to the Dunes Golf and Winter Club. And Chad had a three-wheel golf cart, power cart, which was really kind of odd and old, but it had you could pick up the seat and you could have 36 beer chilled on ice under the seat. And the golf course was really concerned about people bringing their booze to the golf course, because that's why we were uninvited at the other golf course. Anyway, this golf cart caught on fire in the middle of 15th fairway or 16th fairway, and Chad had to unload all the beer and put the fire out. I remember somebody going, good golfer, Charles. Only one fire so far. But Chad just had a great heart and soul, and I toast my friend.
Back on.
Hi, I'm Captain School. I went to school with Chad there. I think it was in grade 9 or grade 10 maybe anyway. And one morning we were just getting off the buses and all this cart come up. And I think it was leaking antifreeze. But anyways, all these, a swarm of honeybees, they come. And everybody was all scared of these bees and stuff. And then they said, well, we'll get Chad because he's familiar with bees and out there. So he left, and then he come back again with a little smoker thing to desensitize the bees there. And he grabbed a went in there and got the queen bee, got all this handfuls of bees, stick them in this cardboard box, and then he had them in the back of his truck, and then took them away and stuff like that. But we were just all just kind of amazed at how he done it and stuff like that. But we thought that was pretty cool, whatever. But yeah, that sticks out about Chad, what he done for the people and stuff like that. So the bees would sting him. But that's my story with Chad there anyway. So.
So I've got a couple more comments I wanted to make, and I remember first time I came to set the Webster area, and we were probably about 10, 12, 13 years old, and Chad taught me a lot about life. He taught me that you can actually ride a horse in front of the house and shoot it with a pellet gun, and that was legit. And that's what they did. I think your cousin Robin was living with you, and he would watch him, and you got to be running by the house, and he'd be shooting at us. Fucking pellet gun. Like, it's the craziest thing. We grew up in Saskatchewan. We had never seen anything like this before. And then we'd be out in the backyard, and he'd convince Skeely to spread her feet, and he'd throw a hunting knife in between her feet. And that's where she learned patience, evidently. But, yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that it was a couple. Anyway, the mic's open. Please, if you guys have any comments, just come and throw it out there.
It's like when you do like the wedding or whatever.